Have you ever sat inside a 5,000-ton artillery turret and felt it shake beneath your feet? In Iron Nest, Heavy Turret Simulator, forget about an auto-aim button. Here you calculate the range, adjust the propellant charge, hand crank the elevation wheel, and only then pull the trigger to rain steel down on the enemy. The problem is that this machine is merciless with anyone who miscalculates. A flawed calculation, an incorrect charge, and the shot lands far from the target, or worse, right on your own front line. That's why today I'm bringing you 10 essential tips so you never miss a shot again in the most brutal and satisfying heavy artillery simulator I've ever played. I'm Matthew, and let's get into the video. The 6 propellants rule is exactly the kind of shortcut I love discovering in simulation games, because it turns what seemed like a complicated calculation into something you can do in your head during combat. Just jumping in real quick with a quick tip, if you're enjoying Iron Nest Heavy Turret Simulator and haven't picked it up yet, it's currently 13% off on Instant Gaming. It's definitely worth checking out, especially if you've been waiting for a chance to grab it at a lower price. Just a reminder that Instant Gaming isn't a marketplace. You buy directly from the store without having to rely on third-party sellers. If you decide to pick it up, using my affiliate link in the description would be greatly appreciated. It doesn't cost you anything extra and really helps support the channel. Now, let's get back to the tips. The idea is simple. You always load 6 powder charges and multiply the distance to the target, in kilometers, by 2. The result is already the elevation you need to set on the gun. No opening the ballistic computer, no waiting for automatic calculations. Just multiply and adjust the angle. What I find interesting is that this rule isn't some random trick. It comes straight from the game's general formula, which is elevation equals distance times 12. Divided by the number of charges used. When you lock in 6 charges, that 12 divided by 6 becomes exactly 2, and that's where this multiply by 2 trick comes from. In other words, the community didn't pull this out of thin air. They just found the charge count that makes the math cleaner and easier to do on the fly without wasting time thinking. In practice, this completely changes your pace during a match. If the ballistic computer goes down, if you're playing on a more realistic mode without assists, or if you simply need to make quick decisions under pressure, this rule becomes your go-to backup plan. You check the range, multiply by 2, dial in the sight, and you're already firing, while another player would still be typing numbers into a console. It's just worth remembering that this isn't the most efficient approach in every situation. Using a fixed 6 charges means burning through more powder than necessary on some shots, and the shell's trajectory changes depending on the amount of charge used, so the flight time and ballistic arc won't always be ideal. Think of this rule as a tool you pull out when you want speed and convenience, not when you're looking for maximum ammo conservation or the perfect trajectory for a very specific target. For me, this is one of the most crucial tips for landing your shots in Iron Nest, Heavy Turret Simulator, because it eliminates an easy mistake to make, trusting spotter data as if it were already dialed in for your weapon. A spotter's report shows where the enemy is, but it doesn't necessarily give you the correct bearing from your Iron Nest's current position. The safest procedure is to draw a new line starting exactly from where your turret is located and extending to the designated target. This line is what will reveal the correct azimuth, or bearing, for the shot. It seems like a minor detail, but an offset in the measurement's origin point can send the shell flying in a completely wrong direction. I like this mechanic because it forces you to think like someone truly responsible for the fire solution. The spotter acts as your eyes on the battlefield, but the final call has to be calculated from your own battery's position. Even if the report shows the enemy's range and location, that data only becomes genuinely useful once you reconstruct the trajectory starting from the Iron Nest. So, before every shot, especially after repositioning the structure or receiving a new coordinate, I would always redraw the line to the target. It's a quick habit that can prevent an entire string of wasted shells. In my case, I treat this rule as mandatory. The spotter finds the enemy, but the Iron Nest is what needs to calculate the final bearing and range. A tip that sounds simple but makes a huge difference is clearing the Scratchpad constantly. I treat this as a mandatory part of prepping before any new mission. Once a firing solution is done, wipe the old data. Just right-click on the saved information in the notepad to keep it from cluttering the screen and causing confusion. The issue is that the Scratchpad easily piles up coordinates, ranges, bearings, and other data. When you start a new mission and look at old information mixed with current data, you might end up using the wrong reference point or adjusting the artillery for the previous target. Since the game demands attention to mechanical and ballistic details, a single incorrect digit can send the shot way off target. The clipboard can be opened quickly, via the Tab key by default, and entries can be removed with a right click. In practice, I recommend establishing a strict routine. Read the new transmission, clear the old content, copy only the current coordinates, and then run your bearing, range, and elevation calculations. That way, your Scratchpad stops being a cluttered archive and turns into a clean slate for the ongoing mission. This organization also makes it easier to cross-reference your calculated solution with the turret's control settings without mixing in values from previous salvos. For me, this is one of those habits that feels like overkill at first, but quickly becomes muscle memory. Before every new solution, think, Scratchpad clear, coordinates checked, calculation ready. Early on, many mistakes don't stem from poor aiming skills, but simply from working with outdated data. Clearing the notepad before each mission is, therefore, one of the easiest ways to cut down on errors and significantly boost your chances of hitting on the first shot. Using a star shell before committing heavier ordnance is one of the smartest calls you can make whenever there's any doubt about the target's position. Field spotters are a huge help, but they can relay imprecise coordinates, and blindly trusting that data can lead to a completely wasted shot. The star shell acts as a confirmation tool. Instead of immediately launching an expensive bomb, you illuminate and better reveal the area indicated in the report. This allows you to verify whether the target is actually where it's supposed to be, and, most importantly, reduces the risk of hitting the wrong area or causing friendly fire. I use this strategy primarily when the spotter is far from the target, when the intel feels outdated, or when the sector is too chaotic for a direct strike. It's better to spend an illumination round to confirm the situation than to waste a high-value projectile and take a penalty for hitting allied units. The only thing I'd avoid is turning the star shell into an automatic step for literally every shot. When coordinates are solidly confirmed and the target is an urgent threat, it might be faster to fire directly. But in uncertain situations, this round acts as a small investment that protects your most valuable assets and makes every strike far safer. This is one of the tips I consider most important for avoiding irreversible mistakes. Before feeding the shell and powder charges into the gun, I would always pause for a few seconds to double-check the target, range, ammo type, elevation, and charge count. Once the projectile is rammed and the breech is closed, there's no simple undo button. In practice, you have to fire what you loaded or adapt your solution. What makes this mechanic unforgiving is that a tiny mistake can compromise the entire sequence. If you select the wrong shell or load fewer charges than intended, you can't just back out to a menu and fix the setting. The game forces you to deal with the consequences, turning every loading sequence into a major decision. Exactly what you'd expect from a simulator designed to make players act methodically rather than just spamming buttons. Because of this, I developed a ritual before locking the breech. Confirm the coordinates, remeasure the distance on the map, verify the ammo type, and check the charge count indicated by the ballistic calculator. Only after that would I load the shell into the gun. It's also worth remembering that overloading powder doesn't always mean a ruined shot. In that scenario, you can recalculate your elevation based on the charges already loaded. More powder demands a new solution, not necessarily a mission restart. For me, the best mindset is to treat closing the breach as the mission's point of no return. Up until that moment, you can review everything. After it, the priority shifts to recalculating or committing to the loaded shot. So before pulling the lever, read the fire table one last time and confirm target, range, ammunition, charges, and elevation. That short pause can make the difference between a direct hit and a completely wasted mission. The most reliable way to avoid missing your shot is alternating between the traverse lever and the hand wheel. The heavy lever is used to slew the turret quickly toward the target, covering wide angles in a matter of seconds. Once the indicator gets very close to the correct azimuth, let go of the lever and take over with the hand wheel for the fine decimal adjustment, locking it in at the exact value from the ballistic calculator. This is the standard, recommended way to operate the turret. Lever for rapid movement and hand wheel for precise decimal tuning. If you try to dial in the angle using only the lever, you'll notice the needle jumps and overshoots the mark, forcing you to constantly correct back and forth. With the hand wheel, each small turn corresponds to a fraction of a mil, allowing you to align with precision and keep the turret steady when firing. The same logic applies to gun elevation. Use the sliding lever to get close to the vertical angle and the hand wheel for the final decimal adjustment. Against counter-battery targets or at long ranges, where 10 to 20 mils can throw the shell completely off-grid, this care makes all the difference between a direct impact and a missed shot. To practice, pick a fixed azimuth in the tutorial, aim first using only the lever, then only the handwheel, and finally use the combined method. Lever to get close, handwheel to dial it in. Once this workflow becomes routine, map, calculator, lever, handwheel, check. You'll feel the turret responding much more predictably and every salvo landing exactly where you planned. For me, this is one of the tips that truly separates an average shot from a genuinely calculated strike. Against moving trains and convoys, there's no point in aiming where the target is right now, because the shell will spend several seconds in the air before impacting the area. During that window, the enemy will have already advanced across the map. That's why I would always check the travel time on the firing panel before hitting the trigger. This number shows how long the shell takes to arrive, and it must be factored in alongside the target's path. The longer the flight time, the further ahead of the current position you need to lead your shot. The safest way to do this is to observe the train or convoy's upcoming waypoints. Instead of aiming at its present location, try to predict where the target will be when the shell lands and direct your fire to that future point. I like this approach because it turns shooting into an act of anticipation rather than a simple reaction. At first, you might miscalculate a few shots while getting a feel for each target's speed and shell travel times. But once this habit becomes second nature, engaging moving targets becomes far more consistent. The secret is remembering that you aren't trying to hit where the target is now, but where it will be when the bomb finally comes down. Choosing the right projectile is, in my view, almost as important as calculating elevation. I usually consider the target type and surrounding risks first, because a perfectly aimed shot with the wrong ammunition can still fail completely. AP rounds are the safest bet against bunkers, fortified structures, and underground positions, and they're also useful when friendly forces are very close to the objective due to their smaller blast radius. On the other hand, HE and HCHE rounds are designed to wreak havoc on exposed targets. Standard HE works well against a single surface target or a small cluster, while HCHE is better suited for situations where multiple enemies are concentrated within the same area, capitalizing on its wider blast radius. In other words, there's no sense in wasting an HCHE on a single isolated target, just as it makes no sense to use AP against an entire infantry formation. I would also be extremely careful with HCHE near friendly troops. The larger blast radius significantly increases damage potential, but it also elevates the risk of friendly fire. Before firing, check the map to ensure no allied units are inside the danger zone. When friendlies are nearby, AP can be a more controlled option to strike a specific point without turning the entire sector into a kill zone. My personal rule of thumb is simple: fortified target, bunker, or friendlies close by, AP, exposed, concentrated target, HE, multiple grouped enemies with no allies around, HCHE. If you make this assessment a habit before every loading sequence, you'll avoid wasted shots and better grasp the armory's logic. There is no universal shell, only the right tool for each problem. After an emergency maneuver, whether during the Phantom Battery mission or when using emergency reposition, High Command loses your location, leaving you blind on the map. The solution is straightforward. Fire a test shot into any quadrant and use the impact location to reverse engineer where you ended up. The emergency move teleports the turret to an unknown position, and using this test shot is a legitimate technique widely used by the community to reorient quickly. In practice, you purchase 2 test shells, often star or AP, depending on the mission. Pick an easily readable bearing and range. For example, bearing 0.00 at 0.5 kilometers from a reference point, and fire. When High Command observes the detonation point and matches it with the bearing and range you used, they can calculate back to your origin and update your position on the map. In some situations, the recon report itself will end up showing the turret near the firing origin, visually confirming your location. This technique is especially valuable in Phantom Battery, where counter-battery windows are tight, and every second spent trying to find yourself can cost you the mission. Instead of requesting multiple position reports and attempting complex triangulation right after an emergency move, you secure a solid starting point with a single, well-chosen shot. From there, it's much faster to mark listening posts, cross-reference bearings on the Phantom Battery, and prepare the decisive AP strike. To integrate this into your workflow, treat the test shot as a mandatory post-emergency procedure. As soon as you execute an emergency move, fire a test shot, confirm your position based on the impact, and only then set up your main firing solution. With this routine, you turn a chaotic situation, "I don't know where I am," into a controlled process, cutting down on coordinate transfer errors and ensuring every salvo truly counts. For me, the open map mode is one of the best ways to learn without turning every mistake into a defeat. The early missions help establish the basics, but once you unlock the permanent, uncontested front map, you get a much more comfortable environment to practice triangulation and the complete firing cycle. The skirmish mode, called Chill, Uncontested Front, is particularly useful because it removes the counter-battery threat. Without having to worry about immediate enemy return fire, you can test different charges, angles, ammo types, and target plotting methods with far more composure. I use this map as a personal proving ground. You can observe how travel time impacts your shots, compare results across different elevations, and practice interpreting spotter reports. This kind of repetition is far more effective than trying to learn everything under the gun in a high-stakes mission. The main thing is not to view this mode as a waste of time. In a game with so many variables, a few minutes of low-pressure practice can save a lot of ammunition and prevent plenty of frustration later on. Once you master the loop of spotting, calculating, firing, and adjusting, standard missions become much easier to manage.